Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 3 in the Crunchy Cobra Jet series. Now, you saw the first video where I did the introduction to the car. The second video, I added a lot of bracing to it, and I removed the rear axle, and I got it sitting on my boat jig, the trailer jig that I created, specifically for purposes like this. Now, if you haven't seen those videos, go back and look at those so you get an idea of what I did and how I did it. Now, at this point, I don't have it fully bolted on. There's still some things that need to get out of the way, namely the power steering box, the idler arm, and all the suspension. Well, I don't have to take all the suspension out just now. I just need to get loose the steering components and get those out of the way so that I can put my bracing in. What I want to continue to do is add supports under the pinch welds. By using the car as my template and knowing that everything is within limits, then when I take the car back off and I set the one-piece floor pan on the boat jig and I have some rigid mounts at the pinch welds, then I can set the body gently back onto the new frame pan or floor pan, and everything should line up. So that's the plan anyway. Let's take a look at where the car's at right now. So as I said in the previous video, it is on the boat jig. I do have some bolts here in the front frame rail where the bumper mount would go. I have an issue with this as this bolt hole internally is bad. So I may have to be creative, but I have this one in place. I'm going to put a regular length bolt in there. I didn't have the right length at this moment. So I need to remove the steering box, and that's these 3 bolts right here. Get that out of the way. I'm going to disconnect part of this steering, whether it's the tie rod ends or whatever. Get those out of the way, and of course the idler arm. Now that'll free up my the space for the other mount that I already have built. And as I said, I want to add supports underneath here at the pinch weld. So I have to figure out what I want to do exactly. I need to get as far back as I can and as far forward as I can using what I have available. So the offset from the trailer to the pinch weld is probably about 8 inches. So I'm going to have to come up with something, but I will do that. In the back, everything else is lining up as it should, so no problems with any of that. So that's the plan, and I'm going to try to move forward with that today, and we'll see how it goes. At this point, I have the Mustang fully sitting on the boat jig. As you can see here, I've moved out this arm. Now, some of the things I ran into with my design is there are variables that you can't account for. What I mean by that is the holes that are in this frame rail, they're not square, let's say. So like the hole on this outer flange or outer plate for the frame rail and the hole on the inside, they're actually offset. So if you look straight through, you can see the hole is not actually lined up. So that became a little bit of a problem with getting this in place because, you know, I've made mine a little more precise, I guess, than whatever they used back then because somehow they got this offset. So I managed to get it to fit. I had to open up this hole a little bit to get this side in. This bolted up, got it in place. The alignments work. This side, there is some variance on this. The hole I have doesn't quite line up, but the height is correct. So I don't think that's an issue. Here is the passenger side again. The height is correct and the bolt is lined up. So I'm very happy with that. Now, the plan at this point is to consider the idea of adding my flanges as I talked about underneath here. With that in mind, I picked this location for one mount point for my support, and then just forward of the pad on the rear. And I'm going to use basically some of this angle iron, and that's going to give me my channel. And I want the thin side of this angle iron to be on the inside because I don't have a lot of clearance height-wise to the floor. So that'll be perfect for that. And what I want to do is create another brace system right here on the boat trailer. This was already in my mind, but this helps me clarify what I want to do. I want to put in some tubing, whether it's this 1 inch or I use the 2 inch like I used in other locations, like over here, and create a standoff, let's say. So I'll have a piece coming this direction and a piece coming this direction to this side. Then I will add, whether it be on top or on the side, one of the big nuts that I used with the all thread, and that will create a standoff. So I will be able to take a piece of maybe 4 inch all thread, thread it into this, and that'll create a post. And then take a piece of this with the angle iron welded to it, and I can slip it over that piece of all thread, and that's going to give me my height. So I don't have to change anything. It should be a fixed location, and that would be all I need. I will build it to what I have right here, right now. With that in mind, what I can do is, if I need to, later on, I can remove all this, so I don't have anything sticking up. So that's the plan with this corner section anyway. The other idea is I'm going to put a cross piece here, again with some all thread, and if you'll notice I have a piece of tape and a measurement of where the hole would be on the floor supports. So if I go to the other side, I can show you that the all thread currently is coming through the floor support, and it'll come down and mate with this cross piece or something very similar. Again, I will put a nut, maybe not on top, maybe on the side, with the idea that I can adjust the height of the all thread, or I can adjust where it's going to sit, and I can also remove it so it's not in my way later on. Everything I try to do is, other than the post in the back, I want to be able to remove things, and this will help in that effort. So that's the plan at this point. I'm going to try to get this put together and then show you again, and then you can see more what I'm talking about. Well, I've done some improvements to the standoffs. So as I had mentioned, this piece of all thread goes up inside of this piece, which sits on top of the bolt there, and I was concerned with getting access or being able to turn that, so I cut off the corner of this piece inside, and I added a nut to the bottom of the shaft. So now I can set the standoff in place where it belongs, get it lined up, and then run this up inside it. Ta-da! So I've got this side all together, and I have the other side made. Same situation, and I can just take this. I'll leave this bolt in there. I just made these, so this will do the same thing. Thread that up inside, and I can run that up with the cordless. So at this point, I'm happy with all this front section here. I'm going to continue to make the rear in basically the same format. And as I was discussing, I think I said I had considered taking a piece of 1 inch square tubing and putting it across and making standoffs from that. I think I've revisited that. What I want to do is a similar thing here, or a similar thing that I did over here in the center. So I'll come up with a leg and come forward, so I have this kind of design, copy this function, so I have a nut and a long shaft that'll go up into the floor supports. So I'll make those, and then I'll show you everything that I get put together, rear and center. So this is what I've come up with for the floor support, and I think this is going to work out really nice. The end result is I have a standoff, and this is a dedicated length, that will sit on top of the nut, which is attached to the all thread. So ideally, if I want to remove this, I have to thread this out of the nut, take the all thread out, take that out of the way, and then I can remove the nut and the standoff. Now what this does is it allows me to keep this area open so that if I need to take out a floor support or change something later on, I can do that. And it also, of course, lines up with the hole in the floor pan, and I think that's going to work out really well. I need to replicate this on the other side, take a little more engineering, let's say, because I don't have a center hole on the other floor support. But I did make 2 of these standoffs that will fit this same location, and these are the exact same in height. So when I set the floor pan on, that'll take care of the height for the floor supports and make sure nothing is dipping in the middle. So anyway, I'm going to replicate that, and I also need to make the other 2 perches that will go in the back corners on the pinch welds. I made the perch or the mount on the left side for the floor support. I only tacked that one in place because I want to be more confident with where it's at when I set the actual floor pan on here, and that should help me index that better. If it's off, then I can adjust something. That's why I don't want to weld it. So I'm moving on to the rear mount points. Now what I found is that there are some flanges right here. This is the forward edge of the torque box. So this is here, and then it goes on back, further back to this area. I don't know if you can see all that, but further to this area. So if I take some measurements, and I'm just wanting to create a perch right here. So I'm going to use that front edge of the torque box and come back to where this notch is. Now this notch is not on the new floor pan. That's not there. So this is like, what was it, 4 3/8. So that'll be my width that I'm going to use. But what I wanted to show you, and this gets interesting here in just a minute, if I pull here, that's basically 14 and about 3/4. Now there is some, probably some variable in that length, but 14 3/4, and you can see this is smooth. These actually butt against each other or flush out very well on this. So anyway, 14 3/4. Let me show you what I found with the Dynacorn floor pan. So same location, I can feel the edge right here, and in measuring this to the edge of the torque box, it's close. This is like 14 and around 5/8. So you can see it, I'm hitting that flange right there. So I'm confident with this fitting the way it should. But what's really interesting is something I found on the body that is on the passenger side. So this, both sides measure out the same, but I'm going to show you something on the body itself. Alright, I hope you can see this okay. As I mentioned, on the other side, the torque box and the outer rocker pinch weld, they were flush. On this side, this piece is hanging out. That is actually the torque box, and it is angled down. So when I was trying to get a dimension here and consider the idea of having my standoff mount point same location, I can't do that. Well, I can do it, but I'm going to have to take this and cut it off. I don't want to trust that. This torque box piece is in wrong. I guess you can maybe see it with the light when I show it to these different angles. Just one of those things. I've mentioned it before in other videos that when they built these cars, yes, they were on a jig, but it looks like, you know, how how tight was her tolerance? Not that great, because there you can even see that's a weld that is almost missing the entire flange. So I'm going to take a cutoff wheel and just square that off and still use that location as I am on the other side. Alright, I have all of the perches made and they're sitting at their location. So I have the two here on the passenger side or driver's side pinch weld. I have the two in the middle for the floor supports. Of course, I have the steering box location on the frame rail and the bumper. And in the back, I also have the forward spring mount and then the rear mount that goes in the jig hole. So I'm very happy with how all of this is working out. And you know, this is sometimes what you have to do. I think in a car with this condition, there's really a lot of risk in cutting things loose and just having it fall apart. So by doing this and verifying all these locations, I can comfortably, I think, take this car back off of the lift, and then the next step will be putting the floor pan back on the jig. I should say take the car off of the jig, put the floor pan on the jig, put the car on the cart, and cut out the floor. So that'll come later. At this point, I do want to show you something else. The owner has brought me some parts. The dash he had was in bad shape, so he found an AC dash, which is great. There's a latch assembly support that goes on the front of the radiator core support. He also found, and I really like this, original panels that go from the cowl to the rear aprons. So that's fantastic. Original pieces. So that's going to be great for that. He did bring me a hood, and my initial response on the hood was not good, because you know, you look at the condition of it, and I got up here and I started finding Bondo. So what I want to do is take the tool that I have. What I want to do is take this Bauer surface conditioning tool and remove the front section of Bondo on the hood so we can get a better look at it. I've been wanting to use this several times and just haven't had the chance, and I think this is a good opportunity to try it out. Well, I'm at a point now where I need to get the car off of the jig. So I will lift it back up with the lift and be able to see and make sure everything lines up the way I expect it to. Get that in the air, and of course reposition some things. I'll have to get the floor pan off of the cart that I have and get it on the boat jig. So I'm going to try to take care of all of that, and we'll see how that goes. Well, that worked. Felt like it lifted off just fine. The only constraint that I have at all is these vertical mounts for the spring shackles. I know there can be some variation with how they built these cars, as I always point out, and I may have made these just a little bit too precise. So when I set the body on here initially, I kind of had to just bump one of those over with a mallet and it dropped in. So it wasn't that big a concern. But now you can see, of course, the brackets for the pinch welds, floor supports, all that sort of thing, and everything else in the back worked out to where it's supposed to be. So I'm happy with that. Now these, of course, go into the shackle mounts, and they line up with holes that I have in the boat jig. All good. Okay, the floor pan is on the frame jig. I do notice some discrepancies, but overall it seems to fit fine. The standoffs are working like they should. I have the shackle mounts in the proper location. In the back, my jig mount points lined up. They fit. I did find that the hole up here for the spring shackle mount, the pieces that I made to fit in there, the dimensions are different. So I don't know if Dynacorn used a different dimension, but this doesn't fit. Now it did fit in the Cobra Jet and in the 68 Mustang, so there's some discrepancy there. The only other thing that I see as a problem is these holes. Now, they don't line up, the holes that are in there don't line up directly with the holes in the floor pan. And when you come down here, I'm actually having to lean my strut pieces back slightly. So what I probably will do, since I can't move the floor supports, I will probably oblong the hole in my brace a little bit and move it back. I know there's variance in these things. Things can be built slightly off, but the thing is, this matched, or should have matched, the floor pan supports in the Cobra Jet. I'm pretty confident with those measurements, so I'll have to address that later. But at this point, this is where I wanted to get in this video, and I am there. So the next thing I will do in the next video is work on getting the car on this cart and start dissecting the floor pan out of it. Oh, I should also point out, we have a new roof. We have the cowl two-piece assembly. There is a support brace for the back seat. Some torque boxes in two-piece configuration. Then we have a left front, I think it says left front frame rail assembly. And then over here we have the right front frame rail assembly complete. Now I don't know if I'll be using the whole assemblies or not. We're debating on that, but just letting you know they're here, and those will be shown later on. Alright, it's nice to see progress and getting stuff done. You may have expected more out of this particular video, but I have a lot of things that I need to address. I wanted to make sure all of those support pieces were in the right locations, and if I needed to adjust something later on I could, and that's where I'm at right now. So I'm happy to have the floor pan on the boat jig. And like I said, there's a little bit of tweaking of the design, or maybe some things that Dynacorn does a little differently. Could be even that the pieces, like the floor supports, maybe they don't have the hole in the exact same spot. I don't know, but I'll adjust for that. But anyway, I want to thank you for watching. If you would, leave a comment and a thumbs up. I want to give a shout out to my patrons who continue to support me. I appreciate them so much, and I look forward to sharing more videos with them on Patreon. And if you're interested, there are links in the description below for my Patreon account, also for Amazon. If you're interested in buying Amazon products, you can click on Amazon and go through that. And any other tools that I may use in the process. I have my Evolution Power Tools and stuff that I've been using. I'm very happy with those as well. So that's it for this video. Until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.